Hey everyone, I wanted to come on here and talk about some of the struggles that I've been having recently, what journey I'm really on, what I'm trying to achieve, and why I'm starting on the medication called Naltrexone. So Naltrexone is used, there are a couple of uses for it. I will be using it for alcohol dependence, alcohol use disorder, substance use disorder, whatever way you want to word it. I am compulsive when it comes to substances, and I've struggled with this for a long time. It's been about 10 years that I've struggled with this. And it's something that I've really been trying to turn around. I've come quite far in my life in terms of changing around, my issues with substances, but there's this hurdle that I'm at right now. I've been at for quite some time, and I feel very desperate to finally, move on from this and not have drugs and alcohol have such a hold over my life. I started using substances in high school. I always knew that I wanted to use substances from the time that I was young. I was always very curious about drugs and alcohol. But I had a lot of issues when I was young, and I was in therapy at a young age. And so it was sort of always preached to me, like, not to do that, and I was kind of anxious around it. So I started using when I was about 16, 17, around that age. I started drinking alcohol, like smoking weed. I took like Adderall, Xanax, things like that. I took acid. Like, I remember kind of just going on my journey, getting into other drugs. And I honestly, very early on, have always loved substances from my first experience with them. If I'm not mistaken, I can't remember if I drank first or smoked weed first. Not that it's really relevant, but my first experience where I really was actually drunk, not like drinking, like drunk. I was completely trashed. I was actually hungover. Even on the third day, I was still experiencing symptoms. I looked it up. This is real. I am very lucky to have not gotten alcohol poisoning that time. But it's just something where I've always struggled with compulsive behaviors. And so when it came to drugs and alcohol, having a long history of struggles and a lot of trauma, it was difficult for me, like, not to end up falling into some type of like addiction to these things, right? Had a long history of like eating disorder, self-harm, suicidal ideation, attempts, So by the time that I was like 16 years old, I figured it doesn't matter anymore. Like, I have this all figured out. And I honestly just didn't care. I was way too curious, and I was tired of feeling like the urge and not acting on it. So that was sort of how everything really came about. I really have used so many different drugs. I have, it also very quickly for me became like an everyday thing. Especially with alcohol, I have always just found it so much fun. I loved being drunk and no one else really knowing it. It was something that I found was like the answer to life. A lot of very cliche things that I think other, people who struggle with the same things may think and or feel. I finally felt happy. So many times I was like, I just want to die with a vodka bottle in my hand. I used to drink vodka all the time because it was cheaper, and it like was supposed to smell less. I don't really know how true that is. That was just like what I hypothesized as like when I was younger. So I very quickly just developed a problem. It was an everyday thing from morning till night. I didn't care. I wanted to die. I used all the drugs and alcohol that I could. I was hoping to die. I was committed to dying. That was just what I wanted. And at the time, I also felt like I didn't have anything to lose, right? Like, if you really want to die, who cares if I'm drinking and drugging my life away, I was having fun doing it. Very early on for me, I had some negative consequences, but I didn't really care about the negative consequences. And so my first time in rehab when I was 20 years old, I went there. I like detoxed while I was there. I didn't have like many withdrawal symptoms that I feel like I could really pinpoint. I was in an eating disorder rehab where they did help with my substance use issues too. And so I was put on Librium while I was there. I had been taking like Xanax every day, so that was a thing too. And so when I was there, I was giving Naltrexone, and I can't really give a review on it because I was in residential treatment for like 3 months. Then I stepped down to PHP, which is like you go there every day, but you just sleep at home. And then I eventually did IOP. Now, once I was in IOP, I didn't give up. Fuck, okay? I really did not care about anything. I was in charge of my own medications, and I just didn't care. I did not feel like the naltrexone was doing anything. I just knew that I didn't want to get better, that I just wanted to go back to doing what I was doing. And so I didn't drink for 3 months, but I was also like locked away for 3 months. So, I started drinking again, and I just stopped taking the medication. I was back where I was. I did rehab another time, and then another time after that. I have done like IOP programs. I've done AANA. I have honestly, I've lost jobs, I've lost relationships, I've been in jail, I've been Baker acted, like whatever the case is. I feel like I've had all types of low points in my using. And, I think one of the things that I struggle with, and it's different for everybody, right? Like a lot of people talk about reaching their rock bottoms. And I think that the issue for me is that, almost again, this is me in my life, I think why I struggle with rock bottoms is because to me, rock bottom feels like rock bottom in that moment. And you think like, I'm never going to do this again. You feel like you're scared straight, like it's over, it's done. And the reality is that, when you're put in a negative situation due to your behaviors, it's easy to promise that you're going to change in that moment. As time goes on, those feelings begin to dissipate, and it's not as scary anymore. And what one day looked like rock bottom to you, next day can look like, or weeks down the line, months down the line, can easily become an everyday thing, right? And so it's been really hard for me. I've had to let go of a lot of people that were definitely using buddies. I've had a lot of very toxic relationships. My substance use issues have taken me anywhere and everywhere. I would want to go into detail about all the things that I've done for drugs and alcohol, but it was bad, and it had a hold on me, and I justified doing anything and everything just for substances, and so I started to change a lot throughout the last, I would say like maybe 2 years, 3 years, 2.5 years maybe, in terms of I effectively stopped not using, I don't use any substances when I have to go to work, right? I was able to set boundaries. I started to build a life for myself in my recovery. And this is why I'm a firm believer that behaviors are not always the best indicator of whether you're getting better or not in therapy, because for me, I was getting better in other ways in terms of letting go of toxic relationships, forming healthier relationships, being able to show some consistency in my life, XYZ. But I was still really struggling with my alcohol and drug use. And so I remember setting the boundary that I wasn't going to use for work. before work, whatever. I've been able to maintain that, but then I turned into what I think some people call like the weekend warriors, which is like you may not use during the week, but then you go really hard over the weekends, and that's actually very dangerous. And it has become very dangerous for me. And then I started, I mean, I don't mix it with work, but then a lot of times, especially I've gone through periods where every day I go home and get unbelievably drunk, trashed. I'll be throwing up at work. That's happened to me. I've had to leave work, miss out on work because I'm so sick. I'll be with alcohol just getting the shakes, I'll be puking, just sweating, all types of things. And so I literally can't do anything. I actually sometimes have trouble speaking and like moving because I don't feel like I have full control of my face, my mouth, my body, and I'm just, so that has been very difficult for me. A couple of months ago, I started to have more and more issues with substances, and they started to really the problem started to creep into my life in terms of like, I was really starting to contemplate like, do I need to go back to rehab? So for me, I think that, I think if you need to go to rehab, I think it's important to make that decision. Only you know yourself best. But I think that at some point, rehab cannot do all of the work for you. For me, I relied a lot on rehab, and I can talk a lot about also certain things where rehab can kind of turn into a vacation for some of us, which is a very privileged thing to say. I recognize that 100%. Most people, from what I've read, who have substance use issues actually never end up getting help. And I think also there's a little bit of an issue that when you're really, really struggling, you're able to go to rehab and get all of this support and people are there for you. But once you start to get better, you start to be discharged and people are less in your life and they leave you more on your own. And it starts to feel like people are not there for you unless you're struggling. And so it kind of creates this negative, like, or like this like reinforcement that like it's always better to be sick because people are there for you when you're sick. People pay attention when you're sick. People don't care when you're doing well. Separate conversation. Anyways, so for me, where I'm at right now, if I had to go to rehab, I would, but I am really trying to give it my all. And so I stay in therapy. I have been in therapy, same therapist that I've been seeing for a couple of years now. She is amazing. She's my best friend and I love her so much, but I also have to recognize like I need more help. And so I've really been trying to commit to change. And, even now it's just been a struggle and there have been so many things. And I know that I can do this, but I also know how hard this really is. I empathize so much with people who, are struggling with this because it's so much harder than you could ever think. Like, I always knew, like, oh my gosh, like addiction, that's so difficult to get through. But going through it myself, year after year after year and negative consequence after negative consequence, and recognizing that like I still can't feel like I can't stop. And it's not that you really can't, but it really feels like you can't. So I've overcome a lot. I've come very far, but this hurdle right now where I'm at, where I am getting so trashed, where I'm using so many drugs, where I'm waking up on the floor in bleach, I mean, it's difficult, and then you have to go to work the next day and pretend that you didn't do what you did, and so I I decided to take naltrexone again. I just met with the psychiatrist today. I picked up my medication, and today's Thursday. I'm not gonna start it actually until tomorrow because well, I'm kind of nervous if it makes me like drowsy in any way or tired. I just don't want it to affect work when I go in tomorrow. So I'm gonna go to work tomorrow. I'm gonna come home. I'm gonna take my medication, see how I feel throughout the weekend, and then at least like hopefully I'll be somewhat adjusted or I can know what to expect from the medication for when I go in on Monday. So for those of you who want to know exactly what it is that naltrexone does, now I don't have all the answers. I'm really going to give a very quick basic answer. Number one, it curbs your urges. So it's supposed to help curb the urges for drinking. I was reading people saying that whenever they do have a drink, they it tastes weird in their mouths. People talking about just not having that urge and that desire. It's supposed to help with like impulsivity. I've read that it's supposed to help with even like self-harm. And that was what the psychiatrist told me today. I have a history of self-harm. It's something I still struggle with. And so that's one of the things that it helps with. The other thing is that when you actually do drink, it's not that you can't really get drunk as much as it doesn't give you the same euphoric effects that are associated with drinking. So it makes you less likely to pick up another drink because you're not having the exact effect that you may be looking for. So like I said, I've taken it before. I can't really give, an accurate or like a very good judgment on how I felt because I was in such a controlled environment. I was in rehab, and I got out and just like stopped taking it, and just went right back to always getting messed up. And I was like showing up to like rehab drunk anyways, and so yeah, I just didn't care anymore. The last thing I was gonna mention is that it's different for everybody. Some people think once an addict, always an addict, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Like, one is too many, 1,000 is never enough. I've been to AA a million plus times. I've done rehabs where, actually, yeah, the rehabs I've been to, they provide AA. And so I've done it. I've had a sponsor before. I think you have to find what works for you and what aligns with your values. For me, abstinence is not my long-term goal. But I have also recognized that for right now, I do have to be rigid, and be as abstinent as possible. And then down the line, if I really want to talk about drinking and whatever, then I can revisit that with my therapist. We can have a very open, honest conversation and what boundaries am I going to be putting around that. I don't believe in a lot of antiquated treatment models around addiction and alcohol use, and so I am, this is what I'm doing for right now. I am nervous about it. I don't think I've ever been more determined to like really beat this demon inside of me. I keep reading all these jokes and it's like, people drink to get drunk, and then, I drink and end up smoking crack. And it's like so true. Like I end up getting drunk and like I disappear for days, or I'm like, shooting up meth after like doing cocaine and Xanax and Molly and acid, and I'll combine all these things that I'm shocked I have not died. And I think that that's been another fear of mine. Using drugs, a lot of people are dying with fentanyl overdoses, and I don't have fentanyl strips. I don't have Narcan with me. If anything were to happen to me, if anything were being given to me that were not pure, I wouldn't know. And I've been put in a lot of situations, very close calls. I've ended up in the hospital before due to my using. So, when you wake up and don't remember the past 3 days, it's very scary. And so it does linger with me, like what happens the day that I don't wake up, you know? I wouldn't even know it. I wouldn't know it. And so this is where I'm at. It's actually just been a huge weight on me, to not be able to overcome this. It gets in the way of anything and everything in my life. I hate myself for it, and yet I can't stop. And I know people talk about addicts being selfish and like, how dare you, you know, and I get it. It's not to say that addicts can't be selfish, but there's so much more to it than that, you know? And for me, you know, it's been a pattern for 10 years. So it's not that easy for me to just wake up and stop, you know? Maybe it is for some people, you know, maybe some people, they're just like, they reach their rock bottom or whatever it is, and that's fine. Like I said, for me, I have really had to kind of adhere to the saying of like, rock bottom is just when you stop digging. I've had 1,000,000+ rock bottoms, you know, handcuffed, whatever, you know, in jail, like I'm never gonna do this again, and then somehow I find myself in the exact same situation. And so yeah, so if anyone's ever used Naltrexone, please feel free to comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you're also struggling, please also let me know. I am a firm believer in harm reduction. You don't have to be so hard on yourself. You don't have to shame yourself. And it's hard because I don't want to shame myself, but then it's easy for my mind to do gymnastics and start rationalizing using again. And so once again, although using is not the end of the world, I really have to have a very rigid, abstinent-based outlook on my life right now. If I slip up, whatever, I'm very open. You know, my therapist and I were actively talking about everything, but I am beyond determined to do this, like no matter what gets in the way. This is what I really want for myself. It's what I want for my life. I have all these things that I want to do, and not even just that, I'm just not able to be while being so caught up in my addiction. You know, I'm not myself. I'm not able to explore my life in a way that's genuine and authentic and transparent, and really vulnerable and open to the experience when I'm always turning to a substance. So I think substances can help expand your consciousness. I think that they can have so many benefits. And then I think it's also important to be mindful of like, is it a negative thing? You know, I don't want to keep waking up on sidewalks. I don't want to be woken up by strangers. I don't want to be, I mean, the list is on and on. Been there, bought the t-shirt for like pretty much everything. And so, yeah, let me know what you think, and I hope that everyone has a great night, rest of their day, and hopefully this will also facilitate me posting more, because that's another thing. It's difficult for me to post when I'm like urge surfing everything and, you know, anything, because mind you, it's like, if it's not drugs and alcohol, it's like cutting or my eating disorder or, you know, my OCD or, you know, whatever it is, anxiety, depression, like my low self-esteem. So many things are getting in the way. And this is the one thing that I am just like throwing myself into. And although I may not be a big proponent of like AANA for my own life, I think that it's something that I am probably going to be exploring. I need to be around people too who kind of understand what I'm going through. And I think that although those groups may not be perfect, they can also help. So I'm going to explore that. It may work, it may not work out. Totally fine. I don't want to have a punitive approach towards, you know, my journey, but I also want to make sure that I am doing the best that I can to stay on this path. Okay, that's it. I've spoken way too much. Take care.